So thank you for joining us for another edition of Let's Talk TCI Real Estate. It is a delight to be in your homes on another beautiful Thursday afternoon. I'm excited about this show today, and I would like to say to you who are listening, please like and share this page with anyone who you know would be interested in hearing about the conversation today. What we will be doing today is highlighting some of the similarities and the differences about the real estate process in the United States of America, as well as that with the Turks and Caicos Islands. I think this show will be beneficial to customers who are looking to invest in the Turks and Caicos or even invest in the United States. And it's always a good idea to understand the process somewhere that's foreign to you so that you can make an even more informed decision or be more educated about how things work elsewhere instead of just dependent on that local knowledge of course, in this case, real estate. So it gives me great pleasure to have a guest with me today and a person of George. And he is one of my Keller Williams colleague from Maryland. And I'm going to use this opportunity to allow him to do the proper introduction of himself. Please go ahead, George.
Good morning, Renika. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So my name is George Schwab. I'm with Keller Williams Realty Center in Frederick, Maryland. So I'm a realtor in the Maryland area, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, and in that triangle type area. So I do buying and selling, but I primarily work with new home builders or custom home builders in this area. And I've been doing this for 6 years at this point.
Well, thank you so much, George. Like I've said, again, it is a pleasure to have you here with me. And I am looking forward to this conversation about real estate in the U.S. and in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So I have a number of questions I have prepared for you today. And I'm just hoping you are excited as I am about getting this information.
Let's do it. I am excited about it. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Great.
I'm actually looking forward to hearing a lot of the stuff about Turks and Caicos as well.
Yes, I know you have visited the Turks and Caicos before, so you are quite familiar, but will be interesting to get your feedback, as a realtor and also from a realtor from the U.S., right?
One thing I didn't mention in my introduction was that I have been coming to Turks and Caicos off and on for about 35 years. And so I've been there quite a few times, and it's definitely my favorite island in the Caribbean.
Why, thank you. So, just to get right into it, many of our buyers in the Turks and Caicos Islands actually comes from the United States and Canada, right? And many of them are more so second home buyers and investors. Where would you say that the majority of the buyers in the U.S. are from, and what are their main reasons for buying real estate in the U.S.?
Well, most of my clients and most of the clients of the people that I work with are people who are buying and selling locally. They are traveling, if it's somebody that's coming from another area, it's going to be mostly from the DC area. Mm-hmm. DC is a very populated area, Washington, DC. And so there's a lot of people that want to make a change and come to our area, which is only about 2 hours away, hour and a half to 2 hours away. And so same thing with Baltimore. And so those cities are starting to get a little full. There's a little bit more crime here and there. And so as those people start to consider buying and selling a home, they very often consider our area, Frederick, Maryland, Newmarket, Maryland, in this area, because it's a lot more affordable. They can get a lot more house. There's also a lot of young people in their mid-20s that are graduating from college and that are now looking to buy. So we're seeing a lot of that first-time home buyer activity in our area as well. So there's a lot of activity, and that's mostly where we get. We don't get a lot of second home or resort home or vacation home type business in there. There is some of that, of course, in the coast or on the Maryland coast. But for the most part in this area where I work, it's mostly young people buying their first home, or people selling in DC, selling in Baltimore, and then relocating to this area as well.
Okay, That sounds first time home buyers and persons relocating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's also because, of course, the United States is so much larger, and I mean the population is wider, more areas to cover, and that's why most of it is relocation compared to us who are more so dependent on
Hmm.
persons coming in, and that's why we are attracting more of a second home buyer market, and then investors for investment properties as well.
Right, exactly. So it's a very different dynamic of your buyers and sellers as opposed to my buyers and sellers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So exactly who can purchase real estate in the U.S.? And the reason I'm asking that question is because here in Turks and Caicos, there is no restriction on home buyers for foreign investors. Does that also apply to you guys in the U.S.?
Yes, it does. So anybody can buy and own real estate in the U.S. The only restriction might be if you're financing and getting a mortgage, then you would need to have some documentation for the mortgage company. But just if you're an investor coming to this, if United States in general,
Hmm.
you are able to buy pretty freely a home or property here in the United States.
No restriction. So
No restriction.
what kind of title is actually given?
It's well, there's two types of title. One's called a fee simple, which
Hmm.
is the highest level of ownership that you can have in property, in
Hmm.
land. And then the other one is ground rent, which is kind of going by the wayside. It used to be a big thing when land was too expensive for most people to buy. So the person who owned the land would retain the ground rent on that, and then somebody would build a home on it, and then they would continue to pay yearly to the property owner. But that is actually something that's gone away considerably, aggressively gone away over the last number of years. And actually, personally, I've never seen it, but I have heard that there are still a few pieces of tracts of land here and there that have that. But for the most part, it's a fee simple status of the land of the land use.
Right. Yeah. We also in Turks and Caicos have freehold title to land and home ownership
Yeah,
here in the islands. Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
So, would you say that? Well, first of all, I must ask because we're talking real estate. You guys, do you have a buyers and sellers agency, or do you just do you? I mean, can you explain that for me? Do you? That's what you have over in the U.S.
Yeah, so you have to be either the agent, a buyer's agent, or a selling agent, or a listing agent. You cannot be the same, both of those for any individual client. Now, an agent cannot be a dual agent, but a broker can be a dual broker.
Broker.
So,
Okay.
so the brokerage can. From one brokerage, two agents one can be a buyer's agent, one can be the listing agent. For the brokers, then we have a dual agency agreement with that buyer and seller. But if the agent can only represent one party, it can't represent both. So in the case of if I have a listing and a buyer comes to me that's unrepresented, then I will ask them if they're comfortable being unrepresented, and then I'll have them sign a document saying acknowledging that they are unrepresented. But I then represent the listing agent, or sorry, the sellers. I will be the listing agent representing the sellers, and
So
then
then, go
the
ahead.
buyers will be unrepresented.
So the buyer will be unrepresented.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so you can't represent both. Okay, because here,
Cannot represent both.
right, because here in Turks and Caicos Islands, we don't have a buyer's agency, and we can represent both the vendor and the seller. Even though our due diligence is to the seller, we can
Yeah.
still represent the buyer and the seller. And
Okay.
what we normally do is just to avoid any conflict at the end. This is where we allow the real another agent, the attorneys, when it's time for the final closing on the transactions, this is where we would have the buyer to have his or her own attorney and the seller to have his or her own attorney, just to make sure there is no conflict in resolving any issues that may come up and making sure that the transaction will close securely. So
Right.
that's how we actually handle it, having the rights to represent both buyer and the seller.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good. Yeah.
right?
Excellent.
Yeah, it's just like you say, it is interesting to see how it works. Do you guys have an MLS system there in the US?
Yeah. So we have MLS. There's various MLS systems throughout the country. The
Mm-hmm.
one that we have here is called Bright MLS. It takes up a very large area of the eastern shore here, or eastern United States,
Mm-hmm.
called Bright MLS, and so all our listings go into Bright MLS, and from there it goes to all the other brokerages and also third-party search engines.
Okay. So then that also gives the other agents a fair opportunity to help sell those properties as well then.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So if I were a buyer's agent, I would go to MLS. I wouldn't go to Realtor.com or Zillow or anything like that. I would go to MLS, and because on MLS, all the
mm-hmm.
coming soon is never is a status. It's, so you can get put it on the market ahead of letting the general public see it. And so, as an agent, only agents have access to the coming soon status listings. So they have about a 2-week jump on those properties, so they can add value for their clients to say, hey, this property is coming up for sale. It's not on any other third-party search engine yet, and so if you like it, based on the information that is available on the coming soon status, I can work with my buyer to perhaps put in an offer.
So with the coming soon, is that a signed agreement you already have in place?
Absolutely. You have to have a coming soon signed agreement with the listing, with the seller. Exactly.
Okay. But it's just that you have that 2-week opportunity to shop it before putting it on MLS.
Well, it's on MLS because the agents can access it on MLS, but it's not on a third party search engine like Realtor.com or Zillow or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's why it's coming soon to them.
Exactly. And it gives the agents a little bit of a head start ahead of the general public.
Okay.
Well, and so when I talk to people about hiring a buyer's agent, that's usually a big tool that I use. That's a big reason that I use. If you don't have a buyer's agent and you're getting all your information from Realtor.com or Zillow or Trulia or whatever, then you're basically 2 weeks behind the ball.
Right. Okay.
So you should hire a buyer's agent so that you're getting the latest and greatest information.
Okay. So that means do you have a specific buyer's agent that you work along with then? Because you definitely want to get your property sold.
Right. So for my listings, of course, I have listings, and then but I also have clients that are buyers.
Right.
And so it does work out once in a while that I have to drop one of those. I have to say, okay, this is my listing, so I'm going to have to drop you as a buyer, but we can work together still to buy this property for you. But most of the time, my buyers, I look for them and we find a house and I represent them as a buyer's agent. Mm-hmm. And then very often, more often than not, but 80% of the time, I have the listing. And so I'm more of a listing agent than I am a buyer's agent. Much more. Yeah.
All right. That's understandable.
How about you? Are you, what is percentage wise, are you a listing agent as opposed to a buyer's agent?
Well, I'll say, personally, I think I've done more sales than listings. Okay. So more buyers than listing. And I think it's like you say, because of the advantage that the MLS system gives us. And we have a lot more persons out there, especially now, who's looking to buy properties. Now, but the advantage for us, like we say, we can accommodate both buyers and sellers. So even if we have a property listed for sale, we can match our buyers up with those properties and service both of them.
Gotcha.
And then, like I said, but we also protect ourselves and the buyers by directing them to an attorney when it's time to do the final closing. So in that way, everyone is represented equally. But at the same time, they are able to stick with the realtor of choice to get their transaction completed. So it's a win-win for the seller and the buyer at the end of the day.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
What percentage of properties actually are more financing versus cash deals in the U.S., you would say?
Yeah, and that's all over the board. For me specifically, and for some of the people that I work with, I would say that maybe 20%, 15% or so are all cash buyers,
Mhm.
and then the rest of them get some level of financing. It could be they could put, it could be a VA loan, it could be USDA loan, it could be all kinds of different programs that are out there. It could have as little as 5% down. Some of them don't put anything down, and then all the way some percentage down. Some people put 50% down and then finance the rest. 20% is usually a good number because then you don't have to pay mortgage insurance if you have 20% down.
Okay.
So that's helpful, but it's kind of all over the board within that 80%, that 85%.
Okay.
People that
The
finance.
reason I also ask that is because, of course, again, a percentage of persons come from the U.S. who are buying. We do have a lot of cash buyers, but then we still have a large majority. They continue to ask about financing options in the Turks and Caicos. And what they also do is they talk about, of course, taking out a line of equity or refinancing back home and bringing the cash here in the Turks and Caicos, of course, for reasons being they want to be able to get lower interest rates back in the US compared to here. So, and we've seen a lot of that. And that's why I was wondering if you had a higher percentage of, like you said, mortgage buyers than cash buyers.
Yeah, way more mortgage buyers than cash buyers. We do get some, of course, but I'm not selling vacation homes here. I mean, we're selling primary residences for the most part, and so primary residences tend to have a mortgage. Not always, but tend to have a mortgage. But then again, I do sell a lot of to people that are a little older that are looking to build or find their forever home. They're in their early 60s, late 50s, and they're not first-time home buyers, and they're selling a home as well, so they have a lot of equity, and so for that reason, a lot of times I get a cash buyer, but for that simple reason, they're selling because a townhouse in DC could go for $1.5 million, and a townhouse here only goes for 500,000, 600,000. So people that are selling in Baltimore and DC tend to have a little more equity and tend to have more value that they're selling.
Right. And I could totally understand, like you said, that you mentioned previously about you have a lot more first time buyers because that's what you've been saying over and over. And I can understand that's why, because it's the same scenario here with our first time home buyers. We have a larger percentage who are looking for a mortgage than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suspect, though, in Turks and Caicos, and for your buyers, if they're buying a second home, then they're probably not, young, first-time home buyer type people. They're usually the people that have a primary residence in Canada or United States, and they're looking to have something to rent out or something to vacation to, or
exactly,
that type of thing. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, for investment. Yeah.
Investment.
I mean, how is the mortgage process there in the U.S.? How easy is it?
It's pretty easy. From what I can tell, it's pretty easy. I know it was easy. It's mostly easy for my clients. I have a lot of good lenders that I work with. I have 4 or 5 that I tend to work with. It depends on what my clients need, that I recommend a certain lender to them. But the process is pretty easy. You have to have a decent credit score. I always recommend that they have a good down payment as much as possible, of course. Especially in this environment, in this market right now, we need to make sure that they're pre-qualified and that we're ready to go when we find something for a buyer. When all offers need to have a pre-qualification letter or proof of funds and a substantial earnest money deposit in order to be considered, seriously be considered. Yeah.
I like what you said. I mean, in the way that you said, all offers must have a pre-qualification letter. In Turks and Caicos, of course, we have different financing options. We have our commercial banks. We also have the mortgage companies, and of course, depending on which one you use, is most times is how fast you want the application to be processed, right? And also, when you look at it, but I like what you talked about the pre-qualification because that's something as realtors here we oftentimes try to encourage our buyers to do. However, sometimes we find it a bit difficult getting a pre-qualification letter per se from the institutions. Now, there are some banks that will definitely give you a written pre-qualification letter, whereas there are some banks that will just call you and discuss over the phone and tell you what you're pre-qualified for. So obviously in the US, because it's such a normal thing, you guys, like you say, have an actual letter. I think that's something we need to beef up on a little bit more here in the Turks and Caicos, providing that physical pre-qualification letter. And like I said, they can, but some banks do, some banks do not.
Right. Yeah. I personally will never take a buyer out to look at homes unless I have that letter in my file already. I would never go out and show homes and have them say to me, "Well, we'll get that letter eventually. We just want to look. We just want to kind of have a look first, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to get a pre-qualification letter." I said, "No, if you're a serious buyer, then you would have a pre-qualification letter. And how do I know what price range to look in? Mm-hmm. I have no idea what price range to look in if I don't have a pre-qualification letter."
Right. I mean, just hearing you say it, sometimes it's a breath of fresh air, sometimes because we're preaching it as realtors here in the Turks and Caicos. And so, persons listening can also see that, this is a standard thing that we ask for, not just here in Turks and Caicos, but all over the world, where persons want to make sure that you're pre-qualified and also that, you as a buyer know exactly how much you can afford. So the realtor will be able to find the best possible property within your price point and will be able to act quicker once that property is identified.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So explain to me, go ahead. So the process of buying in the US, like how is the process from start to finish? Just a quick synopsis.
Well, I mean, I kind of wrote it down a little bit just to make sure that I remember exactly. I know, of course, I remember it, but when you talk about it all in one line, the process for us when I work with buyers or buying a home is really the first step, which if you look online and look up different things about buying homes for the consumer, getting an agent, finding a great real estate agent is like fourth on the list. And for me, it's always the number one. And the reason it's number one on the list is because that agent is not only going to help you through the entire process, but can also help you find a lender.
Correct.
Can counsel you on how to improve your credit score. That lender will, I mean. But finding a good lender. Now, if you have a great agent, then every buyer has some challenges. They may not have a great credit score, or they may not have a huge down payment, or they're looking for a fixer-upper as opposed to something that's already ready to go. So that agent can right away steer that buyer directly to the right lender and into the right areas in order to get to a point where they can be ready to buy a home. If you put that agent fourth on that list, then you're really doing a lot of work and making a lot of mistakes and doing a lot of things you may not need to do prior to getting that agent. So for me, the number one thing, get yourself a great real estate buyer's agent. And then after that, then that agent will help you and hold your hand through the process of getting pre-approved, kind of understanding what they're looking for, walking them through that process of what exactly are you looking for. I know that a lot of buyers think they know what they're looking for, but then when they go through the process and start talking it over with a good agent, then that agent will purse out exactly what they're looking for.
Correct.
And so that saves everybody a lot of time and energy and frustration. if there's a credit score issue, that lender can help them with that. Um, Understanding closing costs. Somebody a buyer might think that I can afford $400,000 for a home, but there's closing costs. So that $400,000 home is probably going to cost you closer to $430,000.
Hmm.
And also down payments. What does it mean to have a good solid down payment? So those are all things that a buyer's agent can help with, that most buyers wouldn't necessarily think about, especially new home buyers. If you're a first-time home buyer, then having a buyer's agent, you need that person right from the get-go.
Right.
So then, of course, you start looking at homes. You get through all that process of getting a lender, getting pre-qualified, understanding what you want. Then you start looking at homes, and then, of course, you go through the process of putting in an offer, and an offer is accepted. You go through the due diligence stage of doing inspections, and then you go to closing, and then you have your home.
Okay. Well, yeah, we have a sort of a similar process. Select your agent. Of course, we always ask for pre-qualification. Sometimes we're not able to get it, but we have to use our judgment, at that time. And then, of course, you view the homes, you make an offer. Of course, you do your due diligence, and also you close. So we are in the same step by step as to how it is done. Now, I just want to break it down a little bit further, and then you can probably do the same on your end. Once someone makes an offer, what type of deposit, in most cases, is a standard deposit? Because, like for us, if it's a cash deal, for example, it's a 10% deposit, and then the balance of the purchase price at closing. And closing can be, depending on the complexity of the transaction, it could be 30 days or less. What I mean is, I've had a transaction that closed in 6 days, but I'm just saying a standard closing time is 30 days or less. So what's your procedure? What's your down payment, and when is the balance due? And what's your closing? How many closing date?
Sure. So right now, because of COVID and all the things, closings have taken a little longer. Before COVID, it would be standard for 30. If you're financing and your lender needs to do, underwriters need to do due diligence and all that, 30 to 45 days before COVID. Now that's more like 45 to 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
As far as an earnest money deposit, so you have to put an earnest money deposit down with your offer so that people know that you're serious. And that's usually only about 3 or 4%, maybe 5% or so. It's a very small amount of money. $5,000 or $10,000 on a $400,000, $500,000 home is pretty normal. Then of course that's put into escrow with the real estate brokerage. If I'm the buyer's agent, then it goes into the listing agent's escrow account, and then that's used towards the closing costs at closing for the buyer. But of course, in addition to that, there's the down payment, and that's something that's all over the board. Like I said earlier, 20% is a good down payment, mm-hmm. because it avoids mortgage insurance. But not everybody can do that. So there's a lot of programs out there that allow you to put 5% down, 10% down, all kinds of variations of down payments, and then there's a lot of government programs. There's a lot of government programs because generally speaking, the American concept of owning your home, having the American dream, owning a home is something that they want to promote. So there are all kinds of programs to get people into owning their own home. In addition to that, in Canada, for example, if at the end of the year, if you are a renter, then you get to deduct your rental payments off of your taxes. Mm-hmm. In the United States, that's not allowed. In the United States, they deduct your mortgage interest off of your taxes. So there's a clear distinction in Canada. they just want to get people into homes, whether they own them or rent them. And again, there's I guess, an advantage to renting because you get to deduct that off of your taxes. But in the States, that advantage is only with owning your own home. So there's a push towards owning instead of renting.
And because you mentioned taxes, I have to ask, what type of taxes are you looking at when you own your own home? I guess it's based on price range as well, just to give us an idea of what it is.
Well, that's going to be a very, very difficult question because not only is that very different from state to state,
right? Yes,
it is very, very different from county to county within the state because there's county taxes and there's state taxes. And sometimes a state might not even charge taxes. They get their tax money from somewhere else, and there, it would be zero, and only some county taxes. It's really across the board in the United States. It is all over the place with regard to that. So that is a question that I couldn't answer.
Right. Well, of course, being here so many times in Turks and Caicos Islands, one of our key selling features of properties here is because we don't have any property tax. We have a one-time stamp duty fee, and of course, it's based on the price of the real estate that you are purchasing. So once you've already purchased that real estate and you pay that stamp duty, we don't call it a tax because it's like a one-time payment to the government. Then that's it. No yearly taxes that you have to pay. But I had asked because you were talking about taxes, and I know that taxes would apply in most instances on purchased properties in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I was more referring to income tax.
Okay.
So if you have, everybody pays income tax, but you get to deduct certain things, and one of the major things in the United States that you can deduct off of your income tax, to save on paying income tax, is your mortgage interest that you pay throughout the year, and you can reduce your income by that amount, and then you pay on the net after you deduct mortgage interest payments. So that's a real benefit to owning, because you're saving hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars in taxes, income taxes, if you own a home. Whereas if you rented, you wouldn't have that advantage.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, then there's real estate taxes as well, and that is all over the board.
Okay. Just going back a little bit, when we're talking about the office, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the contingencies that you usually have within your office offers that you present?
So, there are all kinds of contingencies, but the most popular ones are, of course, that the buyers want to do an inspection of various systems. Could be a septic inspection. Of course, the general house inspection is standard. And I would never let a buyer buy a home without having inspection done by a qualified home inspector. If the home is on a septic or a well, then we would do those. If there's a fireplace, we would do a fireplace inspection. Structural sometime if it's a home that is older, that maybe is a fixer-upper. Mechanical, for the HVAC system, or the plumbing or electrical or all that kind of stuff. The home inspection would typically do those types of things as well. But it really depends on the home. But yes, so we do those type of inspections, and that would be contingency. Sometimes a contingency would be the sale of their existing home for a buyer. So they would say, hey, I'm going to offer you this amount of money, but one of my contingencies is that I have to be able to sell my home within the next 30 or 40 days.
Right.
And then they have to prove that it's on the market and that it's listed with a reputable realtor and all that kind of stuff.
Do you have a lot of contingencies with that? Offers with that contingency of selling a home?
It's a tough one. It does happen. It doesn't happen anymore. Now, in this economy, in this environment, in a real estate environment, you don't see that too much anymore at all because things are just being bought up like crazy. I think the last question is that what market are we in?
Right.
And we're definitely in a very, very strong seller's market. So things are moving off the shelf very, very quickly. So most houses that are going on the market are only on the market for 3 or 4 days, and then 3 or 4 days with 5 or 6 offers. And so there's a real
bidding war.
Yeah, there's a real bidding war, and all those prices are going up with every purchase, with
Yeah,
every listing.
I saw one of those. Sorry, I saw one of the market report that you had posted recently on Facebook, and it was like wow, meaning to show you how the properties, like you say, were moving very quickly,
Yeah,
and you actually had a very low inventory um, of properties, which was clearly an indication that you are in a seller's market. And it shows, I mean, and I think that's happening a lot of places because it's the same thing here in Turks and Caicos. We are in a seller's market as well, and I think it's a surprise to a lot of people because of COVID. You know, many persons were thinking that things would have slowed down because of uncertainty, but meanwhile, it's the opposite. Persons want, but let me speak in the Turks and Caicos. A lot of people now are trying to get into residential homes, for safety, for protection reasons, and of course I can see in the US, like you say, persons are relocating still, and it's the same situation straight across the board.
yep, yep. Well, people, generally speaking, are trying to get out of the very highly populated and densely populated cities, and because they're thinking that maybe this COVID thing isn't going to be a one-off, it might happen again, and so they want to have something with a little bit of land. They want to have something where they can go outside and not be on top of their neighbor. And so, yeah, so we're seeing a lot of people moving out of those very densely populated areas and going to more, less dense populated areas with a little bit of property, or maybe an acre or 5 or 6 or even more
Right.
of land.
Yeah. Because you talk about acreage, the majority, like you have a higher percentage of homes being sold than vacant land, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, I personally sell. Most realtors, I would say 98% of all realtors don't really deal with selling land
Correct.
or building new homes. Most of them deal in resale of homes. So it's unique that I work with a builder, and we have many lots available, multi-acre, large premium lots available, and also we build those new homes, and these are custom homes. So it's a kind of a unique niche that I kind of work in. And out of I think we have 130 agents in our office, and only 3 or 4 of us work with builders like that, like custom builders.
Do you find a lot of people want that's a new construction?
Now, yeah, because they're all very inventory. The inventory. A good, healthy economy has about 3 months worth of inventory, 2.5, 3 months worth of inventory. We've got 2 weeks worth of inventory, and so it's a super, super tight market. And so people that are serious about buying, they're getting very frustrated because what's out there's nothing out there. What is out there really isn't even close to what they want to buy. And and if they do find something that they don't even want to buy, it's inflated, and they won't even consider buying. So one of the things that now those people are now reverting to building.
Right.
The problem is with all the COVID stuff going on, building materials has increased triple in price. Lumber, plywood, concrete, shingles, appliances, HVAC systems, plumbing fixtures like pipes and PVC and all that, electrical fixtures, electrical wiring. It's all doubled and tripled and in price. And it's so, about 3 years ago, I was quoting about $220 a square foot to build a brand new house. Now I'm quoting $300 plus to build a new house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Turks and Caicos, we are 300 plus as well. And it all depends on, of course, the bells and whistles, right?
Yeah.
New home construction. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a little different for you guys because everything that you have to build, you have to bring in on a big boat or on an airplane or something. Of course, for us, that's a little bit less. But yeah, it's very, very difficult to build a home or to build anything on Turks and Caicos because it's all brought in from somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say difficult is difficult is the word, but I understand where you're coming from, because I understand you mean that we have to import everything out in, but we have some contractors here, well, let me say this: persons who want to build instead of buy, I know it's a concern of theirs in terms of being on the ground, making sure everything is done. And we have some reputable contractors here where they liaise everything and they organize and make the process as smooth as possible. I think the main thing is, like you say, the cost to bring in the material.
Yeah,
That's a big challenge. But once the material is on the ground, the actual process is actually straightforward in terms of building. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and I know a few of those builders, and you have excellent builders on Turks and Caicos, and they build very high quality. And I have to kind of say that their quality of their homes are probably a little better than here,
We have
because
a lot more concrete structures. What are your structures?
it's all stick built around here.
Right.
It's all the walls, everything is stick built. We have these foundations with big basements in them, like 9-foot ceiling basements and all that. So it's a big concrete foundation with the floor basement. So it's a very different type of building process.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, it's nice to have. When I go into a building in Turks and Caicos, it's nice to be able to touch the wall and it's not drywall; it's actually concrete and it's very solid.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. So I just want to wrap it up here, and I will
Sure.
just want to say to of course, those who may be listening to this show, if there are any questions that you would have that you would want answered by George or myself, please put it in the comment section. After the show, we will go over it, try to respond to your questions, and also I'm going to have George give his information at the end of the show, just in case you want to reach out directly to him in a personal, secure contact manner. But I want to ask you one last question before I ask for your closing remarks, actually.
Sure.
Having this understanding, of course, both of the Turks and Caicos because of how long you have been visiting here, and also definitely of the U.S. market because you are a realtor there. In your own words, can you give some of, just briefly, probably one or two benefits of buying in the U.S., as well as what you've seen as a benefit of buying in the Turks and Caicos Islands?
Sure. So, buying, like I said during the interview, buying in the U.S. is definitely something that it's a primary residence. That's really what people are buying. But buying in Turks and Caicos, as an investment property, as a vacation property, I always recommend Turks and Caicos to my friends because it is such a beautiful, kind of an unspoiled island. The water there is just unbelievable, and there's so much great snorkeling and activities there. It's truly a paradise, an island paradise on Turks and Caicos. So for that purpose, that I do recommend that people at least visit Turks and Caicos and look at investing there and building in Turks and Caicos. For us here, it's a very different reason for building or for buying or building, and so I think the two can complement each other. Does complement each other, and so I for the most part, I just I try to counsel people with regard to the differences between island living, island investing, and visiting, as opposed to buying and building a house in this area.
Okay. All right. And I just want to say once again for the listening public, since I've known you, George, definitely you have a wealth of knowledge that you can share with persons. And obviously you are doing well in your field of work in Maryland. And I just want you to, one last time, just give a brief synopsis of which area you service in the U.S., and what are your specialties? Because I'm sure that you have a lot to offer to buyers as well as sellers over there in the U.S.
Well, I really appreciate, Ernest, that you invited me on the show, and it was very informative to me. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate
So did I.
you taking the time to do that with me. My name is George Schwab. I am a realtor with Keller Williams Realty Center in Frederick, Maryland, in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Frederick area, and all the area in between. And I do specialize in working with builders, but I absolutely work with buyers, and I work with sellers for resale. But if you're looking to build a beautiful home on a multi-acre lot in this area outside of DC or Baltimore, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help you, or even just provide some insight and advice as to what to look out for.
Okay, thank you. And give your email address and telephone number.
Sure. My email address is very easy. It's newhomesbygeorge@gmail.com. That's newhomesbygeorge@gmail.com. And my phone number is 301-514-9618. 301-514-9618.
Well, thank you once again, George. It was a pleasure. And to the listening audience out there, I will say to you, have a great night, stay safe, and remain blessed. Until next time, I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to Let's Talk TCI Real Estate and not that of Keller Williams TCI or any of its affiliates. Any action you take upon the information provided on this show is strictly at your own risk, and Let's Talk TCI Real Estate guests or hosts will not be liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of the material. I am not an investment advisor, broker, or dealer.